Okay, so we're gonna do a quick video here, reacting and analyzing some of Bart Ehrman's videos. He basically tries to discredit the Bible, most of the New Testament, because the Old Testament is even harder to discredit. Um, a lot of prophecies that came true. A lot of the Jewish scribes were very meticulous as far as they would throw out a scroll if they made one if one letter was wrong or anything basically. um so anyway, we'll just jump right into it. There's a lot to go through here. I'm going to start on one of his newer ones. I found on this one he's actually more unhinged. I watched this one first and I was like, this guy's like a little crazy. And then I watched this one second, which is 9 years old, and he's actually more reasonable in this one and makes some better points, I would say. But first, we're gonna go through this one, and we'll see what's up.
Please.
I went to I chose these because they're the most played ones. So he's saying whatever he's saying here is the most engaging. So I wanted to address those. And then this one, I went through the entire video and made notes. I don't have time to play this entire video. No one's gonna want to watch that. So I'm gonna try to just go through my notes on this one, but I'm gonna start here just because some of this is very dishonest and misleading.
Except one man, the high priest, once a year on the Day of Atonement, could go in the presence of God to offer a sacrifice for the sins of the people. But normal people had no access to God where he dwelt. Jesus dies, and the curtain is ripped in half. Now, everyone has access through the death of Jesus. It's a terrific passage because it's the death of Jesus that gives people access to God for Mark's gospel. So that's in Mark. Luke has the crucifixion, of course. Jesus is crucified, and he has the ripping of the curtain in the temple. But Luke is explicit that the curtain rips in half before Jesus dies.
Now, is this true?
Read it yourself.
That's quite a claim. Read it yourself. Okay,
now,
let's do that. This makes me a little angry because this guy is a Greek scholar and can speak in Greek and read and understand Greek. But we're gonna go to first. Actually, first I'm gonna show it here. Now in English, it is a bit. It seems like that. So it was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. For the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And when he said this, he breathed his last. Now, it can seem this is before, but the way you write it, you can write if something happened at the same time, then you can't write them at the same time. You have to write them separately and say they and use the tools of language to imply or say they happen at the same time, right? So that's in NIV. It's a little even more vague there. I'll do New King James too. These are some of the more popular versions. Now here it adds and, but it also says when. So this kind of implies that it didn't happen at the same time as the temple. But now let's look in the original. So we have, and it was about the 6th hour. And see, this is anyways, no, I won't get into that now. But and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour, and the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent. That means split, torn. And Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Into your hands I commend my spirit," etc., and gave up his spirit. Now notice, so the sun was darkened and the veil of the temple was ripped in two. And so the copulative and a cumulative force. So this means and also. It can mean then, but it doesn't say what Bart was claiming is that it says the veil was torn before Jesus died. That's not what this says. It doesn't say anywhere that happened before. A cumulative force means they could have happened at the same time. So if I throw up a ball and clap someone at the same time, that's how you'd say it. You'd say and, but you can be doing them at the same time. Like, he's just being dishonest here. It does not say that Jesus died after the tail. It says they both happened. It says this happened and this happened. It doesn't say before anywhere. There is Greek words for saying this happened and then this happened in a different like in a different order, or at a different time. Like, it's obvious here. It's and the veil was torn and Jesus said this and this. So it doesn't say before. It's they all happened at once. It's probably less specific than he wants it to be, but it's not. It just clearly doesn't say before. And this word, I highlighted when because when isn't even there. um. So yeah, when there's no Greek word for it, that's added. So I think this word when is probably why um, Bart thinks that it says before, but it doesn't. It just doesn't say before. It doesn't say this happened before this. It says this happened and this happened. When you add the word when, it kind of implies that that Jesus did this after, but that's not. That's added by translators. And the thing about translators is they are translating. It is an interpretation of the Greek, and they have varying degrees of understanding of the Greek and understanding of ancient Greek, which is different from modern Greek. And anyway, so that's number one. This is not a reason to. It's just dishonest. It doesn't say that. Like, I can't believe that this is a university lecture, and he doesn't even leave the possibility that and means at the same time, which is clearly how you would talk. Like, I don't know. It just boggles my mind. This is just pure dishonesty, in my opinion, because he's smart enough to figure this stuff out and read it in the Greek and realize that it does not say that one thing happened before the other thing. It says they both happened. Anyway, so this is the second one I want to
Say then that
cover.
every word in here is accurate, because it's not. There are other kinds of contradictions besides contradictions between gospels. For example, there are contradictions with known facts of history. It will be much harder to convince you of this, and so I'm not basing my argument on this, and so if you don't buy this, it's fine. You still got to read the Gospels horizontally. But there are known facts of history that in fact, the Gospels contradict. Take, for example, this census.
The last one that we just went over was an example of what he's talking about, horizontal gospel reading. He's saying, I think it was Matthew and Luke said the events took place in a slightly different. He was saying one says at the same time and one says before, when that's not what they say. But anyway.
So according to Luke chapter 2, I mentioned it earlier, Caesar Augustus is the Roman emperor, and we're told that under Caesar Augustus there was a census, and the entire world had to register for the census. Well, that's obviously not true. I mean, people in China are not going to register for some census that's taking place in the Roman Empire. So okay, but just say it means the entire Roman Empire. There was no worldwide census under Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus's reign is really well documented. There was never a census throughout the Roman Empire that everybody had to follow, let alone a census where everybody registered for the census by going to their ancestral home. Joseph goes to Bethlehem.
Okay, first I'm going to deal with what he just said. Okay. So this is what he's talking about, Luke 2. Uh, Now, first, the word taxes actually means enrollment. Taxing is, I guess, the reason for it. Um, it's a weird claim. He was talking about Cyrenius was the governor, and this word tax again means to write off, that is, enroll. And then I guess the taxes is what you're enrolling for, but it's also like we do Canadian censuses still. It's like citizenship also, or like that you're living here. Um, they take note of how many people are living in each house, etc., etc. Um, so I can't remember what else I was gonna do. There's the word for, yeah. So this is the word for enrollment, and this is how it was translated. And notice it was used for in Hebrews when it said uh, basically the people enroll like written in the book of. I think this is referring to the book of life. It's written in heaven, right? I think this is referring to the book of life. But anyways, the point is, it's not always the word. It means written down, enrolled. It doesn't always means taxes, right? So these all other three are in Luke 2. And then the only other time it's used in the Bible, it's not referring to taxes because you don't get charged taxes in heaven. So that's one thing I would note, that to say it only means taxes is misleading and false. And again, he knows Greek and he knows how to look up these words. And now the second one, he's implying that the whole world um, now this one, this word, the whole world has to enroll is what he's implying. Sorry. Now this word does is usually translated as world or earth in the Bible, but note that Thayer, who's a Greek scholar and studies other Greek languages, note what he says here. It's often used in Greek writings. The portion inhabited by the Greeks, or so if Romans used if it's written in Greek about what the Romans were doing, this is the context that it could be used in, just the Roman world, right? So it says in Greek authors who wrote about Roman affairs, so equivalent to the Roman Empire in that context. So they're not saying the whole world; they're saying the Roman Empire. Um, but he's trying to make it as ridiculous as possible to discredit the Bible. Is what he's clearly doing, because he has this took me 2 seconds to look up, and he's a scholar. Arguably, I think he is a scholar. I've heard him speak in Greek, and I can't speak Greek. I can read and understand a lot of stuff because a lot of the words that I study come up over and over, and I understand the context and all that. But he can actually speak Greek well too. So he is a scholar. I think he's a dishonest scholar.
Because David,
I will say though, just to be fair, is that he was way more honest. I think in this one, the older one, I think he's becoming angry and unhinged later in his life.
is his ancestor, and David came from Bethlehem. This is so problematic. David lived 1,000 years earlier. You mean people are going where their
Okay, now this
ancestors lived 1,000 years ago?
The reason why Joseph would go to Bethlehem, it doesn't say that everyone has to, but King David was a famous king in Israel. People referred to Jesus as the son of David. Um, he was obviously maybe Joseph loved David and then decided that's where he would register. I don't think it says. Let's go to Luke 2. See, look, all it says is Jesus went up from Galilee. Yeah, it doesn't say that everyone had to go to wherever their lineage was. So Bart's big problem here that he's going to go through is that it's ridiculous. But
So, all right, suppose the
all it
Democrats
says is that Joseph did that. It doesn't say everyone had to go to the lineage of
take
1,000 years
over
ago.
the Senate as well as Congress at the next election, and they take the presidency, and they dump a bunch more taxes on us. And
He's
so they
obviously
think, okay, we need some mechanism to make people pay tax.
overstating
Okay,
his
everybody has to
thing
go
there
to
a
where
little.
their ancestors came from 1,000 years
He's
ago to
trying to make
register
it
for
as
this
ridiculous as
tax.
possible when it's not ridiculous.
Where are you going to go? 1,000 years ago? And you say, well, okay, but maybe Joseph grew up in Bethlehem. So no, that's not what it says. It says the reason he goes to Bethlehem is because he comes from the house of David. So he's registering where his ancestors.
So that is the reason that you went. Like if me, there's so many. There's so many things I can say. I think I'm just gonna let it be ridiculous because obviously it doesn't say that everyone had to go to whoever their ancestor from 1,000 years ago. Like it just doesn't say that in the text. But he's implying that just because Joseph went to um, Bethlehem, that everyone did, or that everyone had to. Just it's ridiculous.
Came from. Well, okay, where did David's ancestor
If this
come
is
from?
his argument, like this guy has studied all the differences and look for and spent years of his life trying to find problems, and this is the best he has. Like
1,000 years before
this
that.
is ridiculous.
Did the Romans say, okay, figure out 1,000
And the other one splitting hairs with the word and trying to imply that that means before
years ago and then go there?
after.
Really? So apart from that, there was no census of any kind throughout the Roman Empire under
Okay,
Caesar.
claim number 2. There was no census of any kind. So this one, I've never studied this because I didn't have any reason to doubt this. So, this is a very objective one. It even leaves basically what he's saying that some people use it to cast doubt on the rest of Luke's writings. But it also gives the contrary, or like the devil's advocate, you would say, to either argument, whatever side you're on. It gives both sides. Where is it? He lists. Is it not this one? Might be the other link that I have here. Yeah. So this is the interesting one. I thought there was 2 censuses taken. He ruled on 2 separate occasions. Um, It's basically saying Luke was a doctor and a historian. So basically, what I would say about this that's not in here is that if Luke wrote this and it was blatantly wrong, the amount of people that read this that were still alive when this happened, like in the next whatever, I guess it would be like 80 years or whatever, people would have been like, Luke, this is wrong. Like it makes no sense for Luke. Why would Luke lie about this? It doesn't make any sense. All the other disciples would be like, Luke, why did you lie here? Like lying was a big faux pas in that time. Especially if you lied in like account of Jesus's life, all the other disciples would be like, "What are you doing, Luke?" It just doesn't make any sense. And like, why would he make this up? Why would all the other people that lived at that time not dispute it then? Why now? It's very strange. But we will go here, and there's 2. Is this the one that? Yeah. Okay. So this one mentions Josephus and another. I'm just trying to. What I did was he said there's no census taken at that time, so I searched. I'm trying to find out if that's true. Um, yeah. So basically, a lot of people said Luke was a first-rate historian. I'm trying to find where. Um, you can also obviously read this too if you want. I'm trying to find. Yeah, okay, so Josephus made a references, but I think it was the later one, probably the second census. Trying to find. There, we have a different historian, Jack Finnegan. Yeah, so they found some Egyptian papyri that a Roman census was taken in Egypt. So, my only point here, I'm not even saying this is the same census, is that Bart's claiming that there's no censuses, and that's not true.
Augustus.
We have,
Period.
we have.
All right, so there's contradictions in known facts of history, and there are issues of just kind of general historical plausibility.
Touch on the Walking Dead too,
in the Gospels. A
Even
famous
though it's not
example
really- I was trying to just touch
is
on
Matthew 27 when Jesus is crucified, and the graves are opened up, and these people rise from the
claims these
dead,
are
and they start
zombies.
walking around in Jerusalem, which is often seen as one of the weirder passages in the New Testament, and kind of hard to figure out.
Basically, I'm not even going to go through all of it. Basically, he claims that this is just unbelievable. That doesn't make any sense, but that wouldn't happen. Kind of a disingenuous claim, because if you already claim that God can raise Jesus from the dead, and Jesus is still alive in heaven, and like did all the thing, he rose from the dead. He went down, preached in the Bible says Hades. I don't want to split hairs about what that is, but it's basically to all the believers who believed that Messiah was coming and had already passed. He like preached to those people, and then, or at least that's what most people think. But anyways, and then came back, appeared to a bunch of people. I think in Acts, I believe it is, he appeared to like 500, and then went up to heaven and offered the sacrifice and sat down on the right hand of God, basically. And then we have all the other miracles. And if people believe that, then just resurrecting other people isn't a reason to discredit the Bible. You'd have to just say miracles in general are impossible, so God's fake or something like. But that's already an atheistic argument. I don't understand why that's added into the historical reliability of the gospel and contradictions. It doesn't make any sense. He's just like trying to find, I don't know. But anyway, I did want to touch on it. It says the graves were open. Basically, his problem is, I guess, that it's, I don't know. I don't even know what his problem is. I think what I'm going to say here, though, is why I think this is no, okay. I'm trying to explain this. It's complicated, but so I think part of what his problem is, he doesn't understand exactly what's happening, because he implied they're like zombies or something. But if you understand the Bible, which he should, because he's read it all allegedly and trying to discredit it, is that when you're raised, you're actually raised with a new body. They're not zombies. They're like they have a spiritual body that's physical. That's like, it's basically the same body we will get after the rapture or whatever. So I'll say here that so basically they appeared in Jerusalem. I'm trying to find. I'm trying. I can't remember where this is. Is it Second Peter? No, this is not a good. I'm just trying to find somewhere that says 1 Corinthians 15. That's right. I knew it was in Corinthians, but if you forget the exact wording, it's hard to find things sometimes. Um, so here is where I would say um, there's some context for what probably happened in this the verse we were just looking at. They went to heaven after is what I think. I think they were raised from the dead and they appeared in Jerusalem as witnesses, and then because they were raised and they already had their new body. Um, where is it? Uh, it's an immortal, incorruptible body. Put on mortality, death swallowed up in victory. I thought this was also where the witnesses were too. Mm. Maybe was it an axe? Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, okay. So when Jesus rose from the dead, 500 people witnessed that. Basically, my only point here is that so many people witnessed it, and they recorded that it was witnessed by this many people. If there wasn't any people, a lot of this stuff would have been discredited immediately. Word traveled fast then, just like we have news now. It wasn't as fast as we have with like Twitter and everything, but a lot of these claims, um, for the amount of people that believed in that, a lot of these claims would have been discredited. It's kind of similar to the one with the in Luke 2. You can't just write blatant lies, especially this is actually even more so because everyone would have known, everyone in Rome would have known about this. So this would, like, the Roman church would have read this book eventually. And if this wasn't true, they would not have accepted this. Like, I don't understand how to question this is such a weird thing to question, because not only is it not a central idea, but it wouldn't have withstood the first 50 years of scrutiny. It would have been thrown out immediately that this is not scripture, because if it had an error in chapter 2 of saying something like this happened that didn't happen, that all of Rome would have known about, everyone would have been like, this is not true. Very weird claims. I'm gonna throw in this. I believe is it 16? It's the last book of Rome. Yeah. So I'm gonna throw this in because I just studied this and it's reminding me of this. Smooth words and flattering speech. Let's look this up. Plausibility. That's the key word the key thing I wanted to highlight here. Basically, what Bart is saying here is a lot of this stuff isn't plausible. That's what he used with the resurrection, the people that got resurrected and appeared in Jerusalem. Now, I don't think these were zombies. That he's just trying to make it ridiculous, saying what zombies, and then they part of what he says is they rose from the dead, walked around for a bit, and then died again. No, they went to heaven. They were people that had already died. They were resurrected as part of whatever God wanted to accomplish at the resurrection of Jesus. They might have been like the patriarchs, like David and Abraham and them. They appeared in Jerusalem for a short time. They said some things. They wouldn't have even been recognizable because like Jesus wasn't recognizable by some of the because he's given a new body, like I was saying earlier. So until they basically noticed Jesus's demeanor and the way he interacted with them, that's when they realized it was him. But they couldn't tell from his resurrected body that it was him. The same thing with people were resurrected and went to Jerusalem. They would have looked like immortal people. They would have had perfect health and looked different from whoever they were when they were on, like whatever they looked like when they were on Earth. But basically, trying to make the Bible plausible is not only impossible, but my point here is that deceptive people use plausibility as it's a warning written here. And fair speech. Let's see, they use fine speaking and elegance. Which he does in some a lot of it. He's a kind of angry but he does do that. He speaks in Greek sometimes, I think, to impress people because he speaks in Greek very well and it sounds good. He doesn't look up. He uses arguments that we just went over and uses the English translation to support his argument that it's wrong, when the Greek that he knows how to read will expose what he's saying to be false. Especially with the thing in Luke that I was talking about. It doesn't say before, but he claims it says before. Even though he knows how to read and speak in Greek, he just doesn't do it because he's not interested in being honest. So, anyways, I'll play a little more of this because he's just gonna mock it rather than
really
use.
I mean,
what
so
if he read the whole
these are
Bible,
like zombie figures or something.
See?
Presumably
This
they
is where he
die
said
again,
zombie
and
figures
it's
like I was talking about.
What? I mean, so much. Of course. I mean, there are a lot of even evangelicals who will say that okay, that's like it's not really literal. Okay, I am so pleased with that. I'm happy with that. It's fine. It's not literal. If you don't think that's literal, why do you think other passages are literal? Well, that one defies probability. Okay, how about
plausibility,
walking on the water?
like I was talking
Does
about?
that defy probability? No.
It does defy probability, but it happened. See, it's not a good thing, I think, to even. I'm just gonna leave it. But basically, he tries to use the zombie thing when clearly the Bible does not say they're zombies. He's not being honest. I'm gonna leave this one and go to the other one. First, I'm gonna play. I think I'm gonna play a couple of these, and then I'm gonna go through my notes and just say I think the notes are gonna be the least interesting and definitive.
But Joseph wasn't his father, right?
Okay,
Jesus
so
was born of a virgin.
yeah,
So
here
it doesn't.
he's using. Jesus was talking to Mary and said, "My father," and he's saying that Joseph, Mary was a virgin when she had Jesus. So Jesus isn't allowed to say father, referring to Joseph, and some of the scribes change it to Joseph instead of father, just for their own stupidity. When it's perfectly normal, even we say that now. We say heavenly father and earthly. You still call your earthly father, father. And Jesus was reverent to his parents. I'm gonna pull that up quickly. I believe it's when it increased in grace or favor. It's called. Yeah, I believe this. I thought this was where it said Jesus was subject. Yeah, Jesus was subject to his parents. It doesn't say parents specifically, but it was after. So it wouldn't have been right because Joseph was Jesus's heavenly father, even though he couldn't be born directly from Joseph and still have. There's a whole nother teaching about this, about why Jesus had to be a virgin, or sorry, why Mary had to be a virgin in order for Jesus's blood to be. I don't want to get in that now. Maybe I'll do another video on that. But Jesus was still subject to them. So he still treated Joseph like a father. And that is part of why Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and favor with God and men. Because it's right when you're young to be subject to your parents. So we see that contradiction here, that there's Jesus's heavenly father and earthly father. And that's a weird thing to use to try to discredit the Bible, that he called Joseph his father. That's just a strange. Even adopted kids call it. Sometimes there's like a stage where like they kind of reject, but if they respect and accept their adopted father, they'll call them father. Like that is not like, this guy's supposed to be a scholar, talking about misquoting in the Bible. I guess he's using the fact that some of the scribes changed that to like discredit the Bible, but that's just one scribe that did that.
It makes sense for Mary to say, "You're."
And note that Jesus wasn't a big fan of scribes either. He rebuked the scribes and Pharisees a lot.
Father and I have been looking all over for you. And so there are changes in the manuscripts. Some manuscripts.
And like he does say, I'll just add before I go too far, he does say that only 1/5 of 1% of all the discrepancies, that he's basically, this is what he's going through, a lot of the discrepancies. You can see they're not very popular, because even after he goes through a rant about how many thousands of discrepancies there are, he admits that only 1/5 of 1% are. Let me get the exact quote. I have it in my notes. He says the vast majority of the differences were. This is the quote. The quote starts here: completely insignificant, unimportant, and don't matter a thing. So it's strange that he would bring them up.
Simply say, Joseph and I have been looking.
Some of them are the Greek word order. So basically, in Greek, you can switch the words sometimes. You can have like six words in a sentence, and switch two of them, and the sentence means the exact same thing, regardless of which way those two words are. It's just a different language. Hebrew, I think, is like that too. And sometimes there's like only, like in English, it's hard to translate Hebrew to English sometimes, because it'll say like 3 words in Hebrew, and that'll translate to like 9 words in English, because just the way the languages are different. It's so English is a lot more descriptive. Anyway, we'll go
all over for you. Some manuscripts say, we have been looking all over for you. But somebody's changing, like, changing the text because the scene of Jesus' crucifixion. Luke is interesting at the scene of the crucifixion because it's unlike what happens in Luke is unlike what happens in Mark's gospel, the story of the crucifixion. In Mark's, just to illustrate this for a second, in Mark's gospel, which is the first gospel, you have a very distinct portrayal of Jesus going to his crucifixion, a portrayal that is filled with pathos and agony. People don't realize this, that Mark's portrayal is very different from Luke's portrayal. And the reason they don't see that there are differences is because of the way that people read the Gospels. The way people typically read the Gospels, if they read the Gospels at all, but if they read the Gospels, the normal way of reading a Gospel is you start at the beginning and you read to the end. So, okay, you're going to read the Gospel. You start with Matthew. You start with the first verse, chapter 1, verse 1, and you start reading and you get to the end. You go from top to bottom.
Okay, so
then you read Mark. Start at the beginning, go to the end, top to bottom. And it sounds a lot like Matthew. Same stories, a lot of the same words.
So that's vertical reading, when you read one from start to finish. Then the next gospel from start to finish. Horizontal is where you read one chapter in one, or one verse in one, and then read it in the other gospels too, and compare them.
very similar. Then you read Luke, top to bottom, sounds exactly the same. Not exactly, it's different, but it's basically the same thing. They sound alike. And then you read John, well, that's different, but well, in essence, it's not.
John is completely different. John is written, mostly it's a book of signs, and it's not written in uh, chronological order.
It's not that far off. So
it kind of has some chronological order, but it's not even. He doesn't even say. Sometimes he'll say in one story there'll be some Is it chronology? Chronology? I don't know. Some stories will have some order to them, but in general, he's just picking and choosing signs, miracles that teach you something or point to something, and talking about a lot of them in the middle.
They all sound basically the same because you read them from top to bottom, or you read them vertically. The way to see differences in the Gospels is to read them not vertically, but to read them horizontally. Where you read a story in Matthew and you look at the same story in Mark and compare the two stories. When you do that, you start finding enormous differences.
So that's a better way to explain horizontal reading, because the chapters and verses don't always line up, so you read like the story versus story.
There are all these debates about whether there are discrepancies in the Bible. But if you want to find discrepancies in the Bible, all you have to do is read the texts horizontally. I give this as an assignment to my students all the time. I give them the path. I say, take the resurrection accounts. What really happened at the resurrection? Depends which author you read. And so I have them list what happened.
So here he's probably referring to that one we already went over in Luke, where he's saying it said before when it didn't.
Fiction in Mark and Luke, you come up with very, very different portrayals. The significance of that,
so he's still talking about it, but we already
is not just okay. So there are discrepancies. Yeah, there are discrepancies, but that isn't the point. The point is that if you want to know what Mark has to say, you have to read Mark and not pretend he's saying the same thing as Luke.
Okay, he does have a point here, so I'll get into this quickly. Is that the Gospels, one thing he even brings up is the genealogies, and there's interesting differences in genealogies for the reason that real scholars understand that there's a reason why there's 4 Gospels. They're not to be identical. So if you had 4 identical Gospels, they could have easily just copied off Matthew, or which one was? I think it might have been Matthew that was written first. I can't remember, but they could have easily just been like, okay, we're gonna have some people try to discredit this in the future. So what we're gonna do is you write your gospel, and then we're all gonna copy off that and make sure we don't have any discrepancies. They could have done that. That wasn't the point of the 4 Gospels. One of the main points is that Matthew gives the genealogy of Jesus from David, King David. The Jews called Jesus son of David, and the Jews were interested in Jesus' genealogy from David. So that book was written to the Jews and portrays Jesus as the king of the Jews. Now Matthew... John, I'll do John first because I know John off by heart. John wrote a book of signs about the Son of God. The book of John starts, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So this is talking about Jesus as the Son of God. Okay? So the whole book generally portrays Jesus as the Son of God, and it's a different aspect of Jesus. Jesus was such a complex and multifaceted person that the 4 Gospels are actually to give more. It covers more of the Jesus's dynamic personality and the fact that he was not only the Son of Man but also the Son of God, the King of the Jews, and he was a servant. And I believe Mark is the one that with no genealogy, I think. So portraying Jesus as a servant. And then was it Luke that portrays Jesus as the Son of Man? All the way to Adam. I'm just trying to make sure I don't get this wrong because I do get them mixed up sometimes. Jesus' genealogy from Adam. It wasn't in Matthew though. Was it in Luke? Yeah, okay. So it's Luke 3. Yes, it's right here. And yeah, son of Adam. So it goes all the way back to Adam. So not only is Jesus the Son of God, but also the Son of Man, because Adam was a man. Okay. So Luke is Jesus the Son of Man. John is Jesus the Son of God. Matthew is Jesus the King of the Jews, and the Matthew is where you'll find woes. And the reason why, see, there's 14 in Matthew, and it's all chapter 23, and I think it's just one in 24 and 26, but mostly chapter 23 is about the scribes and Pharisees. Now, those were Jews. Now, notice, I'm curious, I don't think they're in Luke. Yeah, so there's also woes in Luke, but it's not written nearly the same. There's one here, lawyers, that's kind of referring to the Pharisees, but this one is. So there's like 4, but it's written way different. Okay, so which one did I say Luke was? Is Luke chapter 3, the Son of Man. Yeah, so Jesus is defending people here, I think, because that's part of what this is. But anyway, my point is that scholars agree on this. Mostly, it's less theology and more understanding the gospel and understanding. My main point with this is, though, there's a reason why there's 4 gospels. They're not meant to be identical. If they wanted to make them identical, they could have. It's to portray different. It's Jesus' life in different aspects of it, different takeaways, different personalities. Jesus was so dynamic. He was the king, like I said, the king of the Jews. He was the Son of God and the Son of Man at the same time. He was man and God at the same time. The book of John is the most clear because everything is assigned. He does all the miracles. Anyways, I can't get. I'm tempted to get into it, but this is already going to be a long video. So let's go back to here. I've got a lot of things going on
because they're different. And so Mark has to stand on its own as a literary production.
He would have a point. He would he's right. They're different, and if you're trying to discredit them, he would have a point. Maybe if Luke did say, okay, an hour before Jesus died on the cross, the veil was torn. Then his point about them being inaccurate would be true. If Mark said it was an hour after, Luke said it was an hour before, but I believe it was Mark and Luke. Mark said they happened at the same time, and then Luke said this happened and this happened. It doesn't say before. So, like, if you want to use this differences in the Gospels to discredit it, you have to actually have proof. Like, he's not giving proof.
In Mark's Gospel, when Jesus is being crucified, in fact, it's a very gripping scene. In Mark's Gospel, Jesus doesn't say anything while he's being led to the place of crucifixion. While he's being crucified, he's completely silent. When he's hanging on the cross...
Okay, so here's another one. Does Mark actually say that Jesus is completely silent? I don't think so. I kind of want to search for it, but I'm going to think. There's a difference between just not writing everything Jesus said, because you can't write everything Jesus did in every book. And just not and saying that he didn't say anything. Okay, so I'm trying to find where Jesus was. The thing is most people won't do what I'm doing right now. That's why I thought it would be important to do it. Most people will just listen to Bart and be like, okay. And he does, if you don't check his claims, he does make a fairly strong argument. But if you check his claims, they all fall apart except for some very obscure ones that don't really mean anything, anyways. Like when he says, okay, we have one manuscript that says this, and one manuscript. One manuscript said that Jesus said Father, and another one Jesus said Joseph. Those are the number one. Those are the same people. He's referring to his earthly father and Joseph. They're the same people. It's just some scribe that thought that would be more politically correct or whatever. That doesn't discredit the Bible. Like, give me a break. Um, prayer in the garden. Yeah. So Jesus faces this Sanhedrin. Yeah. So it doesn't. I can't read the entire book of Mark, but maybe this is what he's talking about. He answered nothing. And then what's the other? I'm gonna actually try to look this one up. Okay, so
He's mocked by the Jewish leaders, by the people who are passing by in front of him. He's mocked by both robbers in Mark's gospel. Jesus doesn't
yeah,
say
so he's
anything
talking about
until
on the
the
cross.
end.
So this is not what he's talking about. This is when he's getting questioned by Pilate. Okay, so this is what he's talking about. Okay, so I'm just reading this really quickly and seeing if it doesn't say Jesus didn't talk. It just doesn't write what Jesus said. That's not an error. Yeah. So he's being dishonest here again. Just because just because who is it? Luke's betrayal, I think he's talking about. Just because the other betrayal recorded things that Jesus said and this one didn't doesn't mean it's an inaccuracy. It would only be an inaccuracy if where is it? Yeah, if they wrote and Jesus did not say a single word the entire time, and then in another one it said, "Well, Jesus said this, this, and this," then that would be a problem. But he's allowed to just not record what Jesus said here. If they, the whole point of having four gospels is that you don't want them to be identical. I can't I can't wrap my brain around why he thinks that this should be the case. They would only be one if they. Oh, it hurts my brain. All right, we're moving on.
Actually, let me tell a story about the gospel because uh, I was when National Geographic was considering whether to finance the publication and dissemination of the Gospel of Judas, they called me and asked me if I would. Yeah. So then she said, "Well, really, what we really want to do is carbon-14 date the manuscript. Are you able to help us with the carbon-14 dating?" Germany, who's a
Yeah,
Coptic
that's
pale,
not even Gospel of Judas isn't
and
even in the Bible.
reconciled them all together with one another in a book that was called the Diatessaron, which means through the four. You take the four, and through the four you get the big gospel. So that was one way of dealing with a problem. Some Christian authors thought that
That's
if you have
ridiculous.
contradictions between these texts, then what that is the Holy Spirit telling you that you need to look for the deeper meaning of the text, because the surface meaning of the
This is
text.
ridiculous. The whole reason you wrote four is because you can't write one and get all the detail you have from four. And we already went through the contradictions that he said that got the most views. Like, if most people that are watching this are going to be interested in the biggest contradictions, right? We already went over all the popular ones, and they weren't even legitimate. So this is kind of not worth going over. Okay, I will go over quickly. This is already really long, I think. What are we at now? 54 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go over quickly. Does it show? think it'll show this. I'm just gonna leave this here if people want to read the whole thing. Now at the start of the older one, he joked at a lecture and asked everyone if they believed that God wrote the Bible, and almost everyone said yes. Then most of them, and then he asked how many people have read the Da Vinci Code, and most of them said yes. But then he asked how many people have read the entire Bible, and only a scattered few had read the entire Bible, and he thought that was funny, and I also think that's funny. Um, this isn't written in a way that it's supposed to be. This is like my notes, so it might be hard to understand. I'm going to try to explain the important parts. So this is a problem, is what I was saying. I don't think the root problem is that people don't read the Bible. It's that they don't understand it and know how to read it. Basically, um, problem is that uh, most people would rather listen to someone that's educated in the historical context um, and the rest of the Bible so that they can put it into context. Although there is a problem that this is often not done properly because the person that they're listening to might have more knowledge than them, so they seem like they have a lot of knowledge, but then they teach it wrong. It happens to me all the time. I did 2 years of Bible school, got my diploma, and I continued studying for another. Basically, since then, I did like 6 to 8 years of fairly rigorous study, and then it kind of tapered off after that. But I've been studying basically for like about 15 years now. Um, and I get it all the time where sometimes it could be okay. We have a difference of opinion on something, but sometimes someone is teaching and it's just blatantly wrong and provably wrong. And because the other people don't have that 15 years of study that I have, but they just see this person as knowing more than them, they'll take them at their word, and that can be a real problem too. Um, yeah, so that's basically what this says. Okay, so this I agree with. Most widely purchased, most revered, and most misunderstood book. Yes, and I agree with the translation problem for sure. And the English, we don't read the originals. I don't know why I didn't realize. We have the originals for the most part. They're pieced together by different manuscripts and whatever, but um, the translation problem is a problem, and that's why I don't understand. He notes this, but then when he has discrepancies in English, he runs with them instead of looking at the Greek to verify that it's actually a problem with the original. So that's disingenuous on his part because he can read Greek and he uses the English translations to try to discredit the original, which doesn't make any sense. Um, yeah, so I put some translations omit certain words. Yeah, yeah. So I actually did cite basically sources and examples from what he said. Now he does make a point of broken telephone, and this is not true in the same way that the way we play broken telephone to kind of illustrate this is by whispering, and you get in a circle and you whisper in the ear, and then that person whispers and that person whispers. Problem is when it's audio or verbal and it's a verbal translation. Um, the way people, I know I do this, is you hear a sentence or an idea, and then if you were to write it down, it wouldn't be worded the same, but it would have the same basic uh, idea because the way you think is different than the way someone else thinks. And in broken telephone, it makes it even worse is that you're whispering. And then what makes it even worse is that some people purposely change it because they know it'll be funny at the end, so they make it completely different just as a joke. But the way scribes copy is different than that. You're copying from something written, and it's actually harder when you're copying mass amounts of text. It's actually harder to change it and reword it in your own idea than it is to just copy it. So it's not the same thing. And I know from I do typing, I type really fast. You almost want to do it mindlessly. So you can still make errors, but you're basically mindlessly copying the text because it's way faster like that than to actually try to digest it and reword it like you would with broken telephone. Um, this is the part I quoted earlier. Um, he has some human errors in the manuscripts. It's not really a big deal. We know about them now. The whole fact that we know about them now proves that we still have accuracy. Um, we went over this one already. Um, there's one instance that he talks about where Jesus healed a leper, and the oldest manuscripts say out of anger, and the newer manuscripts say out of compassion. This isn't really a big problem in my eyes because Jesus healed lots of people out of compassion, and I think it probably was supposed to be anger, but it's also if you love someone and they have leprosy, you're going to be angry at the leprosy. So he can heal them out of anger too. That's fine. I don't see a problem with that. I think this is part of the political correctness where humans have a bit of political correctness or religiosity, and they think that healing out of anger is a bad thing. So some scribe changed it. Doesn't really change anything really. I would prefer have the original if that's the original, but I already went over this, and that's pretty much the whole thing. I already went over that. Excuse me, that was my first hour-long video, I think, and I'll save it, I guess. I hope everyone learned something. If anyone has any things that they think I screwed up or got wrong, feel free to leave a comment. I'll reply. Excuse me. Talking for this long at a time always makes me cough. I don't know why. Thank you very much for listening. I hope everyone learned something, and have a good one.